Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Telsig. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Michael Gerlich, who's the author of a paper that's been doing the rounds on social media and has had a pretty huge impact so far, I think. I'm not sure exactly what your download figures are and your citations, Michael, for this, but the paper that you released back in January now, I think, AI Tools in Society, Impacts on Cognitive Offloading and the Future of Critical Thinking. Since we've been trying to schedule this podcast, I've seen it cited multiple times, and people have referred me to this study that you've put out there as something they're really interested in, have drawn quite a lot of inspiration from. So congratulations on making quite a big splash with this.
Well, thank you.
But the main rationale for this was to chip away at the question of whether AI and the sort of tools that we're familiar with now in higher education is just another tool, or if there's something else going on here. You talk a lot about the causal chain between AI tools, cognitive offloading, and this impact on critical thinking, which I think is something that we're all pondering at the moment. So can you maybe start us off by talking about your rationale for exploring this issue and what kind of piqued your interest?
Yeah, no, brilliant. So, first of all, it was totally surprising. The paper grew such an attention, not just on social media. It has been now by at least tracked over 100 media outlets around the world. A lot in the US, in Canada, Australia, but as well in Europe. Has been from Wall Street Journal to The Economist to many. I had to give a lot of interviews as well. So you are right. A lot of interest comes from the educational sector, higher education, and interestingly enough as well, high schools, right? Educators in high schools. And a lot say it mirrors their own experiences. And this is actually what happened to myself that inspired me to initiate the research, right? I'm mainly at SBS Swiss Business School in Switzerland, but I'm still as well teaching Cambridge, Anglia Ruskin at LSE in London. And with the event of ChatGPT, I realized that in the classrooms, the discussions weren't that critical anymore. And it was just, something you get the kind of a gut feeling, right? And I thought, well, why is that? Because usually in my lectures, we discuss a lot. It's not about just, presenting content, but it's rather the interaction. And I realized students weren't that critical anymore. And then I had to talk with them, and I realized that more students are using ChatGPT. Obviously, this has a plagiarism problem in itself, right? But it was as well that it seems students are using a lot ChatGPT as well in the classroom, right? Because everyone has the computer there. And I thought, let me talk to colleagues. So called up colleagues at the University of Cambridge and Anglia Ruskin and others. And they said, Michael, we have the same feeling, right? And this was somehow the beginning of it. But I didn't want to, let's say, limit it to students, because I thought by logic, when I look how ChatGPT actually works, it offers you cognitive offloading. And let me start here maybe by explaining cognitive offloading, because so often in the conversation, it comes up, but that is not new. Cognitive offloading we had in the past already. But there is a very big difference now, right? In the past, we were information offloading, right? When I was a child, I had to remember all the phone numbers because we didn't have smartphones. So when I went out in the evening, my parents or during the day, my parents couldn't contact me. And if I wanted to contact them, I had to remember the phone numbers, right? Today, I don't even know my own phone number because I have multiple phone numbers. So that is offloading, obviously, and a healthy offloading, because I can free my brain space for something else, right? Now, cognitive offloading means that you can offload the thinking process, right? You don't have to think. Something else can think for you. And that we did not have that often in the past, right? The best example would be the calculator, right? So when you went to school, or I went to school, we couldn't use calculators, so we had to do the whole calculations in our brains by ourselves, right? That changed but this is limited to one very specific area, right? And when you look at tools like ChatGPT, that offers you to offload the thinking process in any situation, right? Even in your private life, when you try to plan a trip somewhere, right? You can ask the AI plan the trip for me. And it does it. You don't have to do the research. You can offload nearly every thinking process that you have, right? And this is what I thought, let's do a study that focuses not just on students, but generally. What does this mean now? Do people, when they use extensively Gen AI tools like ChatGPT or Claude, Gemini, something like that, does this lead to cognitive offloading, right? And then to reduce critical thinking. So these were the initial thoughts. And then we, did the study. And this is how it started, right?
You touched on a couple of things there that struck me when I read the paper. I mean, there's different types of cognitive offloading. And I think the interesting thing is to compare with previous forms of cognitive offloading that we've been alerted to. I mean, I frequently hear the analogy made with the calculator. So we're told that, well, you have no issue with the calculator. This is a tool like any other. It frees up our cognitive space to do more complex tasks. There's the calculator analogy. There's also the information analogy. And I think those are slightly different. So the idea of offloading phone numbers into my phone is a kind of information offloading, which is different from this calculator, because the calculator analogy really genuinely allows me to free up my cognitive space to perform more complex calculations. The information offloading doesn't immediately free me up to do other things. There's something slightly different going on here. But the information one was interesting because it rings bells from the Google effect that we were talking about 10 years ago. And I saw you cited a paper, you cited this Sparrow et al. Article when you were reviewing the literature, and you talked about that this was actually a thing. I remember talking about it, but I don't remember any kind of conclusive decisions either way as to whether or not Google was actually atrophying our ability to recall information. It may be, like you say, it's now we know where to find things rather than remembering them. What was the sense when you reviewed the literature on this? Was there actually a Google effect, and was the cognitive offloading that we associate with Google actually having any kind of positive or negative impact on our ability to recall information?
Yes, so the Google effect did not have any impact on our cognitive abilities, because even today I would say, compare your Claude or your ChatGPT with a Google question that you write, right? If you do not already have an AI that helps, all you get is a vast jungle of information rather than the solution to your question. You still have to analyze, you still have to continue your search and to interact with the data and information, right? So the Google effect, I believe is somehow was the beginning, but Google never got to the point where AI is today, right? Google never really gave us the possibility to offload the thinking process. We could ask it questions, and still you can do. Now it offers you with AI nearly solutions, right? But it couldn't do that 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? Especially when we were discussing the Google effect. All you got was pretty much a list of web pages that had rather less than more information about the things that you were looking for, right? So in that respect, people were already worried that this cognitive offloading could happen, right, with the Google effect. But it was something different. And this is what I can only stress out. AI today, the large language models that we have today, on a totally different level than anything that we had before, right? We never had the possibility that you could pretty much tell something, well, can you write me half an essay or so? It was never able to do that. And although the methodology of a large language model is actually not knowing things, but rather predicting word by word, right? And predicting what you would like to hear, which implicates different problems, that it serves you confirmation bias and those, right? But Google never had that. It was always kind of a search engine. It was always that I don't have to do the search now myself. It gives me access to a lot of information. This is still, the difference between what you were referring to as well, information, access to information and analysis of information, and actually thinking for you. because Google never thought for you. Not when it started, and not even today, at least if it is without AI help, right?
Mm.
But even there, we have large language models already being implemented, that within Google search, you have now an AI that is trying to help you get solutions or look at perplexity, things like that, right? So I believe the first thing that we have to clarify is that Gen AI is definitely new. And the cognitive offloading, I think, is the first time, besides calculators, which is very, very specific, really the first time on a large scales that allows people to offload the thinking. And that is different than getting access to information.
Yeah, because you mentioned, I think the key word that you use in the paper a lot is decision making. So it's, the difference here was that it was easy to see with Google what our brains might not have to remember as many of the specifics and the rote information as we did before, but we would know, as you said, we would know where to find things. So our information scape became a lot broader. I think with AI is the fear here that it's difficult to see what it's being replaced with. So we're offloading, but there's nothing, or at least I'm not sure if you mentioned anything specific in the paper, but there's nothing coming in to replace what's being offloaded. And I think this seems to be more evident in tasks around higher education that we set our students. So to bring it back to the essay or things that we would do in class, the conditions that we set where students can refine their critical thinking skills, these themselves are being offloaded.
I mean, it's a very important thing that you said, right? And in the paper, I gave a definition on cognitive offloading as well, right? It is the decision-making part. It is not the information part. ChatGPT, Claude, and all the others are not offering you just information, right? They are pretty much giving you the final solution. They made the decision for you, while all the other kinds of offloading that we had just provided you maybe a structured, maybe a reduced and already streamlined access to information, right? But you still made the decision. You still had to do the analysis of the data. It was rather providing you data, right? And the Gen AI offers you now already the final solution. There's no process on your side needed if you don't want to, right? It comforts you to the point. Obviously, and this is very important to say as well, that it's not, but it probably comes later in one of your questions, that it's not the AI that is the problem, but how we use it is the problem. And obviously, if you are using Gen AI in a different form, then you obviously have a totally different interaction with it, and it might increase your critical thinking even. So it is not just the AI, but if I accept the outcome that the Gen AI offers, then I have not made any decision on my own. And I think that is the big difference in it, right? So that is then real cognitive offloading.
Yeah, so this is the key point. It's a kind of cognitive offloading that is beyond what we've seen so the comparisons that we're given with Google, with the calculator, they don't fully capture exactly what's going on. It is not simply another tool in the same vein of Google and calculators. It's something that has the potential to change more radically the way we think, the way we process information. And we're especially feeling that in university context because it's the kind of part of the curriculum that we're trying to impart to students.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in specifically with the causal chain that you've put here. So we've got AI tool use mediated by cognitive offloading, and therefore we've got the atrophy of critical thinking skills. So I was reading through your methods and looking at the samples that you analysed and the data that you collected. Some of the way you described it, you talk about there's an association there with AI tool use and offloading, and the next stage being the reduced levels of critical thinking. You also mentioned there's a lot of demographics at play here as well. We can see that there's
age, education.
Yeah, the kind of things that you'd expect younger people are using AI more, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to.
No, you can probably anticipate where I was going with this. I was just wondering, how strong is the causal chain between AI use and the cognitive offloading? Are any other of these variables able to provide explanations, perhaps? The younger people simply haven't honed their critical thinking skills yet, or
Yeah. Well, yeah. This is so valid to ask, and as it is just a correlation rather than causality, it is very, very valid to ask that, right? Before I answer, let me tell you as well, you definitely have heard as well what is being referred to the Microsoft study, which was published like 3 weeks later after mine. And they did pretty much the same study, but only with knowledge workers, right? And it pretty much supports my study as well, because they were looking on confidence levels and they saw that people with less confidence would trust AI more, offload as well more, and their critical thinking reduced, while people with a higher self-confidence, and that would be usually people that are older, higher educated, and so therefore. So it's pretty much the same similarities. But let's come back there. Yes, this is very valid what you said. And we have to understand as well that this is a cross-sectional study, it's not a longitudinal study. And obviously these are not causes but correlations. But due to the multiple methods being used, we were trying to eliminate that this is automatically just because young people use it more, because we saw the same effect as well with older people who use it more, right? Let me just jump a bit further. Because of this huge attention that study got, I've been approached by educators from around the world. A lot ask me, Michael, could you do kind of a professional development workshop for teachers, for educators, how to teach students to use Gen AI correctly, that the offloading is not happening and it actually helps to increase critical thinking. And I said, wow, it's actually a good idea. Let me do that. I developed a workshop. And the first one I read with 80 high school teachers from an international school. So really good teachers, right? And fascinating, especially the younger ones, and we're talking about their late 20s, were struggling, although with instruction, not to offload the thinking process, right? They were struggling as well. It has nothing to do actually with age, right? And they realized, and they said, oh my God, if it is so difficult for me, how difficult must it be now for a 14, 16-year-old student, right? Not to offload and actually use it in a different way. So this is not just limited to age. I mean, we saw the same effect with older people as well. And from the qualitative data that we had interviews running, right? It became very clear when, for example, a manager said as well that in times where we are very much under time pressure and we are under pressure to provide results. If I can give work to the AI and it provides me with good results, why shouldn't I? So it wasn't just young people, right? This leads as well, which goes a step further, for what I said before, it is not just the AI use, it is actually how we use it rather than using it. By just using it, it's not. I use Gen AI a lot to discuss with it. And I have to tell you that works now brilliantly since we have the 4.0 ChatGPT. Before that, it didn't make any sense. Or the O3, right? The O3 version. But you have to be you must have such a self-discipline. You have to tell it, first of all, do not try to predict what I want to hear. I want to hear opposite opinions, right? Challenge me. And rather give me views that are beyond my own knowledge field, right? So let's assume you have a PhD in math and another one in physics, but you don't understand anything from sociology or so, right? So it can actually give you views from there and can challenge you. So it is not that if you use it hundreds of hours, it doesn't mean that you're cognitive offloading, is happening, and now your critical thinking reduces. But we can see that the tool is actually so difficult to use that in normal use, and if you then use it extensively by just asking a question and accepting the answer that's being provided, that this leads to reduction of critical thinking. And in the study we had as well, from the interviews and the open-ended question from young people, actually saying that they are feeling that they don't have to think themselves anymore. Now, I want as well, because we are academics, right? We are researchers. We should say as well that while it is very, very common in sociology that we have self-reported surveys, right? So when we look at the cognitive offloading or the critical thinking, the reduction of critical thinking, this is pretty much self-reported. And this is always, we have to consider that. Usually people would give an answer that would show them in a better light, right? In a better image. And by that logic, people would have answered rather that they are not feeling a reduction of the critical thinking, but would have rather said, no, I still think myself. So considering that, the results might be even more negative, the real results, than what we have seen. But it was self-reported. So in that way, I agree. Young people are definitely not used, first of all, to critical thinking. They haven't experienced it yet. So generally, their critical thinking would be lower than the critical thinking of someone who is 35. The possibilities of critical thinking is number one. Number two, younger people might, I'm just saying might, because there are other studies out there. For example, Deloitte study did a study on companies and with employees, whether they are using AI on the job. More than 70%, if I remember, 74% or so answered they are using AI on the job, or even though in cases where the employer does not allow it, they are using it on the phone, on their private notebook or laptop, whatever they have there, right? And that is very important. So I'm saying we assume, now again, we have a bias there, thinking that young people would use it more than older people. I have this feeling, and from the studies that I see, that that is not even true. If we go to the extremes and we have a look at the boomers, yeah, our study didn't have any boomers, so maybe there. But if you go to Gen X, well, Gen X, this is the generation that grew up with the whole technology, right? Grew up with the internet, then the social media, and they're actually a lot more than we assume. We have this kind of availability bias that older people wouldn't use it that much. At least people who are on the job seem to use it as much as young people do it. And you might see that suddenly all the emails are refined. And when I talk to people, well, they perform all better on the jobs because they are pretty much asking their go-to Gen AI to help them with a task that they have to fulfill on the job. I'm not really sure that we can say that young people automatically use it. I have this feeling that this is somehow an availability bias that is not really correct, that we should reconsider that. In that respect, when we look at the methodologies, when we look as well as on the qualitative data that we brought in, it still stays a correlation. It is not a causality, but it gives the strong impression that could lead to a causality, right? And this is what the study pretty much is about, that an extensive use leads, and now let me add to this, wrong use of Gen AI. And it is not just the wrong use of young people, it's as well of the older people. That it is like I told you, even when I have high school teachers from international schools there, that actually it is so difficult for them not just to ask the question in a way that it gives you directly the final answer. I tell you, I'm delivering a lecture, right, at university, sitting in the auditorium. Everyone has a computer running there. And I say, okay, now let's go into groups and let's fulfill a task, right? Go and do a task. And this is the point where they come together in groups. And this is the most quiet time I'll ever have in the classroom, in the auditorium. And then I'm asking, guys, what are you doing? It's a group work. You should talk first. The first thing that they do is they ask their computer, whether it is Google, whether it is their go-to AI, exactly the task that I gave them.
Yeah.
They're not trying first to think and then go step by step. They actually take the task itself and put it in there, right? And before in Google, it would be when we didn't have AI, they found somewhere an MBA paper or whatever that got uploaded, and they were pretty much trying to find someone who can already do the task for them. That was, in that respect, then already trying to offload the thinking process. Then I don't have to think anymore. Someone else did it for me already, right? And this is where the problem starts, right? It's the wrong use of it, right?
You've raised a ton of points there. There's so many interesting things I want to get back to. But just on that point, do you think that is something to do with? Does it boil down to status and face saving? Because your students working in a group and they know that they're up against colleagues who are peers who are putting these questions into Gen AI, and nobody wants to look stupid. So there's kind of slightly wary about putting their own uncurated initial response to the task up against three people who have AI at their disposal. No one wants to be the first one to abandon the AI in case they sort of reveal themselves.
It could be. I mean, we have the imposter syndromes even with the smartest people, right? And it could be that. But like I said before, AI, then they were trying to get this out of the internet, right? It was always, it could be. The reason for that doesn't matter. The problem is when you continue doing the same thing over and over again, you get used to it. I mean, something totally different, but the Navy SEALs did a study because they were trying, when they trained the soldiers, the SEALs, to find out how often do they have to train something that in a crisis moment, you pretty much get the body response, right? The brain doesn't have to start. So if you freeze, your body still knows what to do. How often do you think you have to do something that you get this body response? 2,500 times. You have to do it 2,500 times, whatever, with a weapon, a movement or so, that when you're in a stress situation, your brain might freeze, but still your body would know what to do, right? So that means if you, I assume now, so I go now beyond my authority and qualification, right? I now build a bridge. But when I think about that, if that applies to whatever I train, because that means your brain sends a signal and then your body knows what to do. So if I do that 2,500 times, I'm approaching the problem the same way. It will be very difficult for you to do it at one point differently, right? Let's say older people that were building the critical thinking throughout their life, their career, approach problems differently. For them, it might be the use of AI might be automatically differently, right, than for the ones who start. And those 2,500 repetitions come a lot earlier in your life and might, create a problem than it might happen with older people who already experience critical thinking. But this is now, that has nothing to do with the study. All that I want to say is that this kind of trying to offload the thinking process happened already before AI, but it didn't work, right? It didn't work. I saw that as well, 6, 7, 8 years ago, where a student typically would try not to analyze the problem first and then go step by step, but was trying to pretty much enter into Google the task or the question and was hoping to get the answer.
One of the key takeaways of what you're saying and what I took from your paper is that the key issue here really is the blind acceptance.
Trust into AI.
So this is the point of divergence where it becomes, you mentioned earlier about how you use it is really pivotal, that we identify healthy and unhealthy use. So it's the blind acceptance. So I'm interested, maybe we can talk a little bit about the responses that came out of the focus groups that was it. And also, I was going to ask you about your own AI use, because I've actually found it interesting to observe my own reactions with AI, because I'm not, how dependent am I on it? And I'm, not, I know everyone sort of plays down their own dependence, but I genuinely sort of find that I find it very useful. I've got some great ideas from it, but the blind acceptance, I just wouldn't dream of it. It's not just that the quality is not there. It's the fact that it doesn't it doesn't sound like me if I'm using it to reply to my emails, which I'm stunned that we do hear this. I mean, you mentioned that, the Microsoft study of knowledge workers, there's been this meme generally that you can 10x your productivity by hooking up Gemini or whatever the AI of the day is, and it will summarize your emails and reply to them. And I'm just thinking, well, why on earth would you do that? I mean, that you're cutting yourself out of the loop. And it's at best, it's just a case for other people to write more concise emails. It's not a case for having AIs email each other and pretending to be someone else. So I can really see in that situation how this atrophy would take place. You're not actually going through the process of absorbing, properly internalizing, synthesizing information, connecting it to other, existing knowledge bases within your brain, and then you can see how this atrophy takes place. But was there anything in these, I think, was it 60 you did? I think, was that the number I got? 60?
Interviews, 50 interviews.
So what was the general feeling? Did you manage to sort of isolate from there a common pattern in where this unhealthy behavior was, what the point of departure was?
Yeah. So a lot of things you said. One was as well the question on my experience. I will come to that then in a minute. Let's first go what people said. The similarities that I could see was clear, right? That even managers who are very critically thinking, that they are people in general, as soon as they get impressed by the output that an AI creates, they start to trust it. And with that, cognitive offloading can happen. Now, the problem is that in our fast-moving environment where we are, right, pressure gets bigger and bigger on people. We talked a lot about students. Let's put them aside. Let's have a look at those people who are at work. The pressure to perform faster, to perform better, is there. Mm-hmm. And all of us, we know, not our employer, not our colleagues, we know that we are not perfect. And now we hope with the AI, and this is where then the Microsoft study comes in again with a confidence level, because it sounds so confident. For example, when writing emails, and you write an email in a language, let's say you are a German speaker, French speaker, and you have to communicate internationally, and then you ask ChatGPT, right, can you look, this is what I have to say, can you give me the perfect answer in English, right? And then the trust happens. And as soon as that's happening, then you start to offload the thinking process, right? And I could see that the environment forces people a lot to try AI. By society. Why? Because everyone talks about AI and says, it's just amazing. Right? Mm-hmm. You can earn lots of money, you are faster, you are better, you are smarter. There is not a real critical discussion around AI. And I did another study where was actually looking on anxieties on AI, right? And it was even more fascinating that people in the social environment, in a focus group, at the beginning all said they don't have anxieties, right? The same people asked them anonymously. Over 90% said that they have anxieties. And you can see that shows us clearly that in public spaces like work or at university or wherever, because everyone says it's so brilliant, it's so good, that somehow we are being forced to use it. And then if it sounds smart and we believe, oh, it does a really good job, and everyone tells you around when you use it, you are being more efficient 10 times, right? You send the 10x, goes even to 1,000x up there, depending where you are. Yeah, and you can go and make millions by doing nothing. It works for you on social media. Coming all that, this is as well the societal pressure, right? Okay, let me use it. And then when it sounds halfway good, and the response is always fast, and the response is always usable, right? You can always copy paste whatever it does. And it helps you even to do your very bad PowerPoint presentations, right? But it does it, right? And before, nothing could do that. And now coming to the point, well, how does that affect me? And now please do me a favor. You and I, we are not the general population, right? We cannot really draw conclusions from us to the general population. We are researchers. I love the critical thinking. I could never offload that. This is why I'm here. What I love most about my work is thinking, the critical thinking. And now I told you I use AI a lot, but I use it as a sparring partner. I use it as a peer to discuss things, right? To get challenged in a safe environment. Let's be honest as well, right? We all are afraid that we might say something stupid or make a mistake there. With the AI, you feel like you're in a safe environment. And I could really have inspiring conversations in a safe environment where I say, like I said, but I have to say this clearly, do not serve my confirmation bias. Do not try to predict what I would like to hear. I would like to have a critical discussion with you about this topic. I have my strong opinion. I need to get other opinions, right? And then it gets fascinating. And this is then when it helps. But on the other hand, like I said, we should not really draw conclusions from our own experience onto the general population. When you look, and one negative effect AI had on me already, I changed my language. I have to admit, because when I read more and more, I adjust actually my language style, and I always try when I see it to change it back. And I adjust it to how AI is using specific phrases or so, and I'm trying to avoid that. But what you can see, and this is not a scientific study, this is just when you look around, emails now all have the same style, right? It means people use it. People are using AI. When you look at college applications, right? I was sitting in a panel at a huge international school, and one of the students was asking, what about using AI for your college application? And the answer was clearly don't do it, right? But then the student said correctly, yeah, but at the University of Vienna, they accepted a student that wasn't a student because it was AI, right? So it means in the end, AI created gets you into a university. And then we had to no, this is a simple example. It's a negative example, actually. Because at universities, and this is exactly what I hear from other universities as well, right? Pretty much all the same essays. And they're actually now deselecting if it looks like it is over-polished and it has this typical style. Because with the essay, they want to get the essence of you as a student applying somewhere, right? They want to understand you as a person better and not to get a polished, generic idea that is being presented. But we see that the use and the application is all over society, everywhere it is. And that has an impact, obviously, right? And if people get positive responses on that work, if no one comes and says, look, your email sounds really weird, that's not you. I want you to write me and not give me a polished whatever, then people get a positive feedback, they trust in it, and they will start offload more and more and more. And that's where the risk is. And there's a risk as well for all the people using AI on the job. And if your work is being offloaded, let's say, up to 80% of your work, and you do not contribute to this, you were only prompting, right? Can you please do the email for me? Not the critical thinking part, like I said, right? Multi-layers discussions doing, and then, you create something and you have kind of a co-worker with you in the AI. But if you offload it really, there comes the point where your employer that says today in our company, we don't use AI. Yeah, they are wrong because all the employees are using AI, not officially the company. There is no policy on it. But as soon as the company realizes that, do you really think they are going to pay the salaries for you just to give, to prompt to an AI that does the work for you? So I can pretty much dismiss 5 employees, hire a cheaper one that just prompts all those things. And this is where then even people who can do the critical thinking, but out of convenience, offload it to the AI, are risking actually something in their future as well.
Yeah, there's a lot in that I agree with. I would just wanted to touch on a couple of points that you made when you were talking about the issues, and it's kind of in the literature review and towards the end of your paper. You talked about, I forget the wording you used exactly, but you hinted at the kinds of conditions that we need to create. We need to create an environment where critical thinking is rewarded, or the conditions where it enables it to flourish.
Exactly.
Yes. I just wondered if you could flesh out a little bit more. Because before I hand over, I just wanted to, there's a couple of things that I thought would be interesting to throw into this mix, because there are discussions elsewhere, within the academic community about AI having the potential to be a leveler, in the sense that it can bring up disadvantaged students. It can provide a great amount of equity. There's also other discussions with a refocusing on assessment security and simply, having observed assessments to make sure that incentives are better aligned, so that students are not lopping off their critical thinking skills. They're still doing what they need to do, and therefore we are better preparing them for the ultimate workplace where they need to retain these skills that we're talking about here.
So let me first, before I do that, support one thing. And AI, especially Gen AI, is the best tutor you can imagine as a tutor. Why? And I'm saying this, whatever class I'm teaching, whether it's bachelor's or I'm in front of doctoral candidates, right? I'm always saying in front of people, my methodology probably is not suitable to a single one of you. Why? Because we all have different forms of learning, different speed of learnings, different background. I'm trying to teach you that I hope that comes closest to most in the classroom, right? This is very important. Now, because I cannot really adjust to the level and focus that an individual student has. At the end, they all have to pass the exam. And in the end, they're all passing the exam. But their learning journey is so different from one to the other. And us as lecturer in a classroom, we cannot really support individuals on their individual journey, but an AI can. And the best example is, let's say you teach something in your class and the student doesn't understand it. Can ask ChatGPT. He said that and that. I don't understand. It gives you an explanation. You can tell it, well, I still don't understand. Can you please? And it can really level it to the response to your educational level, and then go along the journey with you as a tutor. Very important. Not as a lecturer, right? And not writing assets for you. Problem is, if you use it as a writing service, we go into plagiarism and the cognitive offloading and all that, right? That shouldn't be. So let me state this clearly. Yes, I believe AI is huge, especially, let's say, in the global south, where we have people who don't have access to quality education, right, can actually participate as well, definitely. But when we are talking now about our universities, let's say in the UK, for example, problem is, and let's be honest, in higher education, we didn't really change that much the methodology in the past hundreds of years, did we? There were books before. There were people, when you became an academic, the main thing was that you got access to books. You got access to data, to knowledge, right? And the more you could read, the more knowledge you gained, and that made you smarter. So it was pretty much that the access to data equal knowledge and smartness. And still, we changed that over time, but still I can see with a lot of colleagues in a lot of classes around the world, it is still too much content focused. And just by teaching content, I'm teaching purely data and what we want. And this is why I feel very confident working at a business school where you're focused very much on the application of that knowledge, right? So that is not just know and recite knowledge that you either learned by heart or that you have access, but that you can really apply that in a way that it creates a positive outcome, let's say in a company for profit, whatever it is, right? And now we can see in different countries, different teaching methodologies, right? So some are more focused on content, others are focused more on the outcome, on the application. And the more you go towards application, the more the critical thinking is in there, right? So that means since ChatGPT arrived, let's be honest, I had to rewrite all my lectures myself, right? And and assignment as well.
Sure.
I mean, ChatGPT still at this time, I'm saying still, can be different in a month or 2 or 3, right? Cannot really pass an assignment that I do, or you have to use it in such a different way that students usually don't use it, right? Because it offers just generic information, and I'm not happy with generic. It has to be very specific. You have to create value, and I mean monetary value that a company would pay for to pass an exam, right? So if you just give me a bunch of definitions and general statements that we are going to whatever promote something on social media, platforms like A, B, C, D, nobody pays for that. What I would be wishing is after I realized, after that publication and the communication with educators around the world, that the use of AI, of Gen AI, needs to be taught. I believe, it's my strong belief, and I'm actually talking to several universities who are training teachers, pedagogy faculties, that people are being trained on how to use Gen AI and that students use it in the right way. We can't go and say you can't use it, but it should be part of the curriculum, how to use Gen AI correctly. And that we as educators are aware of that students use Gen AI. And we should not go and say, no, if you use Gen AI, I throw you out or you fail or whatever it is. If they use it as a writing service, okay. But we have to focus more on the critical thinking in our lectures as well, because I think when we talk about how do we actually excel as individuals later in the workforce, then it's probably going to be a combination of an AI and a human. But if AI already has the whole content thing, what do we have to bring as humans? And I still believe that's a critical thinking part. That's a decision-making part. And I believe we should focus in our lectures more, based on the subject, obviously, on this decision-making, on this critical thinking part. Maybe more than we did in the past, right? And maybe start earlier with the bachelor's, maybe from your first lecture that we do that, right? So this is what I would be looking for, because we cannot eliminate the factor AI anymore in education. So we'd rather think about it, how we implement it, but not how that it does our work as lecturers, but rather how are students going to use it and how can we use it together to increase the critical thinking and increase the performance as well.
Yeah, and I think a point I'd add to that as well is it's important to bear in mind that the way people learn hasn't changed. I think a lot of the discussions that we have around this are their incentives. It's the incentives that have changed. The way people learn hasn't changed, and good teaching practice hasn't changed. And also, I think fundamental motivations haven't changed as well. I mean, as you say, people want to get smarter. I mean, we have drives to learn things and to acquire knowledge, and I think people are inherently curious. And the idea of, what was it, the Wall-E type dystopia where everyone's kind of sitting on a chair, just passively absorbing curated information. I don't think that's what most people want. We want conditions in which we'll flourish. So it's important to bear these things in mind, I think, when we're worrying about what to do about AI. And
you see me, I mean, getting critical. Hierarchy of need, right? I always refer to it back. And when we see with young students, right, when they, for example, get out of university, not all of them come from a very wealthy environment. So what are they focusing on? So they are on the lower level. It's a lot of monetary. And we have as well a lot of people, that don't just study because they are curious. They are not just studying because they want to get smarter. We have a lot of people who do it out of the necessity. They say, okay, if I could get already my diploma just to get a good job, a lot of them would just buy probably the diploma and do that. I'm not saying it's all of them, but let's be honest as well, right? So, and if you look at the necessities that we have there, right? It is specifically the younger people that a lot of them cannot afford what you were just describing. I mean, I can
Yeah.
afford this now in my life, and I'm full of curiosity, and all I'm eagerly doing is to follow that curiosity,
But
right?
it's a privileged position.
It is, right? When I was younger, that was totally different. So I think I agree with you, but not fully.
Point taken. Yeah, you're right. Not everyone's the same. And as we mentioned earlier, it's people don't always think in the same way we do. I mean, introspection is useful to an extent. I've been very interested in how I respond to things like AI generated music, for example. Would I listen to it? I don't know. Still undecided. But yeah, important to remember that there's so much diversity of motivations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I told you, 8th and 9th of November, we're going to have a conference, a big conference here in Switzerland, the human factor of AI implementation. And it just came to my mind because you said this. We have people from the music industry from the US coming over as well, because AI has such an impact on the music industry, right? And musicians feel now that they get a competition and they don't feel comfortable with that. And AI, it is more than just the cognitive offloading, right? It actually impacts our lives as individuals, of our children. In the future, what kind of jobs are we going to have for them? And as a society in total. So I agree with you. AI is amazing, but it has multiple facets, right? And too often we only look at the huge technological advancement it creates and the technical possibilities it has. But you said correctly, we didn't change how we learn. Humans need evolution to adjust. And this now really exponentially fast advancement of technology, the human cannot go along with, because we need generations to evolve, right? It will take us time. Question is, for how long can we adapt to this very, very fast changing environment, right? So, and how do we complement as humans? Really fascinating, and I'm very interested to see where this leads. There are multiple pathways a future could actually right lead us. Let's see where we're going to be.
Well, Michael, we're up against the clock, but it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for donating your time and being so generous with it. It was great to finally get you on the podcast and to have this conversation with you. If you've got any final thoughts or anything, especially with what's next.
What's next? That's a really interesting question. So I'm very interested in the human factor. So humans interest me most. And now we have AI that comes in. And how do we interact with it? How does it change us, our lives, the society we are in, from a perspective of it's anyway going to be here. We're not looking for a solution how to get rid of it, but how does it impact us, right? And my research leads me further down that road. And thankfully as well to this publication that was really surprising to me, because a lot of it is something where what I hear is, well, everybody experienced somehow. Nobody was really surprised of the results, but it created this attention. But thanks to that, I got now really in contact with amazing people, amazing projects as well, and getting more challenging ideas that I definitely will follow further down the road, how AI will impact us as humans, as a society, and how we should prepare for that. And this is what I honestly stand for. And too many people are, including governments, I've been speaking now since the publication twice at the United Nations. Once was at the Human Rights Council meeting, the last session, and before it was about AI in developing countries. It is, I can see that governments are a little bit more, nothing will happen, right? No jobs are going to be replaced. It's just going to be a tool. Oh, it will help us so much. So it's rather being the denial stage that we have when we describe change, right? So people go through several stages, and it looks like governments are still in denial stage, while companies are a lot further. Many companies are already using it, right? And they get more interested in the topic as well. How does it impact us humans? How does it impact my employees? So this gets interesting for me. And we as individuals have to think about that as well. Like I told you, when we use AI on the job, we have to think about as well, right? How does this impact me over the next 3 years? How does this what will happen if most of my work I actually just prompt to an AI? Did I actually somehow make myself redundant or not? So this is fascinating, and my research goes further down that road and hopefully can help people start a discussion, right, that I believe is needed. And that's it pretty much, because I don't have solutions, right? I mean, people are smart enough, but when we come together and talk like we do today, maybe we initiate another discussion and another discussion that leads to solutions.
Absolutely. It will be a pleasure. And I hope we can speak again, Michael. It's been fantastic.
Would love that. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you as well. And thank you so much for inviting me.